Hey folks, I'm Jack Fossett, and welcome to this demo and review of the new One Control Pale Blue compressor. Before we get started here, I'm going to approach this review a little bit differently than some other demos, and I'll tell you the reason for it. On the One Control website, they describe this pedal as something that will kind of breathe life and vibrance and dynamics into your amplifier, including solid state amplifiers. So compressor demos, and this also has a 3-band EQ. This is kind of a compressor slash EQ pedal. Compressor demos for me have traditionally been somewhat difficult to do, and the reason being that to me, when a compressor is doing its job really well, you shouldn't really notice it. So that can be hard to translate in a YouTube review, right? Because there's a dynamic difference and it kind of pulls up some of the notes, but that's opposed to using a compressor as a compressor effect, like the country clickiness or like the David Gilmour squishiness. Those are two ways that you can use a compressor for more of the compressor effect. Now, this will do that fine. But again, for me as a compressor, I really appreciate more the functionality of a compressor, which if you use it well, the way I like to use compressors, you really don't notice that it's even on as much. It sounds more natural. It doesn't sound like you're using it as an effect. This is also coming from someone who produces music in a DAW and everything, so I can appreciate a good studio compressor and how you don't want everything to sound ultra compressed, but you need to use compressors a lot more than you'd expect you would. So what I want to do for this review is plug this into this amplifier next to me, which is the new Fender Mustang GTX100. It is a solid state digital modeling amplifier based on what One Control has mentioned, is that this will essentially make your solid state amp sound much more lively, more dynamic, more punchy, a little bit more depth to it. And I wanted to do that as opposed to doing it into a tube amp, which already has its own amount of compression. Not that you don't want to use a compressor pedal with it. You follow me though. Now, this is a good amp. This is not like a dead sounding digital amp. If any of you have seen my review of the GTX 100, go check it out. I think it's a great amp, but as I mentioned in that review, it's not a tube amp, and while it gets some really great tones, it dynamically feels quite a bit different than a tube amp. So we're going to play with this. I'm not going to play with the knobs a ton. I'm going to play with the comp and the blend knobs, but I found kind of a sweet spot that I liked on the EQ with it. We're going to just play with the comp and the blend knobs, and I'm going to kind of keep turning it on and off to see if you can hear the difference between how it changes the feel and the dynamics of the solid state amp. We'll talk a little bit more about it after the first section. Let's dive right in now with some single coils. Hope you enjoy this review. All right, so you've just heard this with single coils. Now, in my opinion, there is a dramatic difference. The question really is, how much does it show through on a YouTube video? And part of the reason I say that is because a lot of it is feel. When you're playing with a compressor, a lot of it is feel. And again, a lot of it, if you're using a compressor for the functionality and not for the effect of it, then really what it does essentially, the most important thing that it does is if you're a very dynamic player and you play really quietly at times, and this is really especially important if you play clean a lot, is that some of those notes that you just kind of lightly sashay over, it brings those up so that the audience can hear them. But you don't want to bring it to a point where it just kills your dynamics, where everything's the same level, because then your notes kind of don't breathe the same way. So there's a sweet spot in there. And the EQ makes a big difference because this has a treble, mid, and bass, and that makes a really big difference with a solid state amp. Like for instance, the Fender Mustang GTX, I do find it slightly, it doesn't have that sort of tube amp warmth to it, right? So one of the things that I do is, you'll notice in the videos, back off the treble a little bit and push the mids and the bass a little bit, because pushing the bass on the pedal doesn't make it like boomy like an amp's bass would. It kind of just fills out the bottom end a little bit more. And as you heard, it does do the compressor effect very well if you want it to do that. But I hope you noticed the difference as much as I did sitting next to it and playing, that it really does dynamically change. It kind of rounds out some of the harsh edges that you might get from a digital modeling amp or just a regular solid state amp, and it gives it a little bit more of the sponginess like a tube amp would. Now for the next part, I'm basically going to do the same thing but with humbuckers so that you can hear that as well. So we're going to dive right in. Please let us know in the comments, what do you think? Have you ever used a compressor or an EQ pedal to kind of liven up your solid state amplifier? Have you tried the new pale blue compressor? This is another one of the BJFE designs, and I rave about him in all my reviews for One Control. There's a reason I want to keep doing One Control reviews. Bjorn makes great pedals. I've played a number of his designs with a number of different companies, and One Control, I think they're doing a great job with it because they have this really sort of flashy, sleek, modern look, very high quality, and really honoring the designs. I love Bjorn's designs. I'm really excited to have this pedal. It may not be the sexiest pedal on your board because it's a compressor slash EQ. It may not be quite as exciting as getting a new overdrive or distortion or chorus or delay or whatever, but it actually could wind up being one of the most important pedals in your arsenal if you know how to use it right. So let's dive in again on humbuckers. Going to stick with this amp. Let us know in the comments, what do you think of this pedal? I'm Jack Fossett. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Check out the One Control Pale Blue compressor, and we'll see you next time.